going, and at first I just tried to encourage her. I really wanted her to be strong, and I didn't want this disease to affect who she was as a person or the spirit I knew she had. But eventually she screamed at me and called me stupid and said she wanted to be left alone. Obviously, I knew that what she was saying was real, and so I stopped and I sat us down so that we could calm down and take a rest.
How long were you sitting down for?
We sat down for quite a while. We had only really been hiking for a couple of minutes, but I stopped, I sat us down, and after she was calm, I asked about her school, I asked about her friends. So we were there talking for probably an hour or two.
What did you do after you finished talking?
I decided that there was no use on sitting down on the ground of a trail we weren't going to do, so I decided it was a good idea for us to head back to our campsite. She said she was tired, she wanted to take a nap, and I understood. So I started making dinner, and I figured I'd wake her up when I was done. It was around 6:30 then when Armani came over and asked about Parker. I said she was taking a nap in the tent, and that's when I turned and pointed. And she wasn't there. I don't know what happened. One second she was there taking a nap, and the next second she wasn't. I didn't say anything to Armani because I didn't want him to think something was wrong and freak out. I just wanted him to go away so that I could figure out what I was going to do.
Mr. Ryder, there's been a lot of discussion about these trails that you and Parker were on. Would you recognize photos of that trail if shown to you today?
We only hiked a little bit in, but if it was around where I was, I would.
I'm approaching opposing counsel with exhibits 5 through 8. Permission to approach the witness at the same. Mr. Ryder, what are those pictures?
This looks like a sign. That kind of looks like a trail of some kind. It just looks like photos of the outdoors. I don't know. I've never been to whatever this is.
Mr. Ryder, these aren't pictures of anything that you hiked on?
I don't know. Maybe this kind of looks like a trail familiar, but I've definitely never been here, and I definitely don't know what these random trees are. I don't know what this is.
Defense enters exhibits 5 through 8 pursuant to stipulation 8.
Without objection, Your Honor, pursuant to the stipulation.
Exhibits 5 through 8 are received.
Permission to tender the evidence to the bench.
Please.
Mr. Ryder, a lot of people have talked about your location on the trail. Would you be able to identify where you and Parker sat down that you had described earlier?
Yeah, I picked up a map when I was in Armani's cabin, so we wouldn't get too lost.
Permission for the witness to step down and make use of the demonstrative.
Go ahead.
Here's a marker, Mr. Ryder, for you to use. Could you please mark with a dot where you were at when you and Parker sat down?
Yeah, we only headed a little bit into the Lecron Loop, so I'd say it was probably right about there-ish.
And let the record reflect that Mr. Ryder marked the location where him and Parker sat down.
In red, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. The record reflects that.
And Mr. Ryder, could you mark with your initials what time you and Parker sat down, or what approximate time?
Yeah, like I said, we were heading slowly in. I figured we probably sat down probably around 4:30. And you wanted my initials, right? Yeah?
Yes, Mr. Ryder. Thank you. And I have one final question with you in regards to this map. Did you ever go over to the overlook?
The Calkins Rock
Yes.
overlook? No, like I said, that is about as far as we got. I didn't really press on any further.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. You may retake your seat. Mr. Ryder, I'd like to go back to what happened when you found out that Parker was missing. What did you do when you realized that your daughter wasn't there?
The only thing I could think of was that I had to find her. I wasn't thinking super clearly, I just knew that she had to be somewhere. I started looking all over. I walked into where we were around the trail. I didn't see anything. I headed towards the campsites again. I thought about calling somebody, but I thought I didn't have time. I had to find her, and that's when I remembered I told her to meet up at the cafe if we ever got separated. So that's when I jumped in my truck. I went to the cafe, and I went in expecting her to just be cooling off from the argument we had earlier and hoping to just see her there, and then she wasn't. And I just started to panic even more. I started spiraling. The only thing it made me think of was when I lost my wife, Terry. She died of a brain aneurysm, and I felt just as helpless.
Mr. Ryder, what did you do when you got to the cafe?
I noticed she wasn't there. I didn't know what else to do. It's all kind of a blur. I was searching for hours and hours, and I was so tired. I headed back to the campsite after that, and I just thought I'll sit here, I'll wait here, maybe she'll just come back, and I guess I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I remember is Detective Chesney waking me up.
Mr. Ryder, were you able to go along with Detective Chesney and help search for your daughter?
No, I was tired, and I was trying to answer her questions, and then she was arresting me and saying I was in violation of something, and she threw me in the back of the car, and I never got to be there and help search. I don't know how much help I exactly would have been. I was so tired from searching all night that previous night, but the fact that they didn't even let me be there, I would have done anything to just see her one last time.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. No further questions. Would opposing counsel like me to deconstruct the demonstrative?
You can move it up.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Please.
Mr. Ryder, my name is Mr. Charles Graham. I'm just going to be asking you a few questions on behalf of the state of Midlands today, all right? I want to pick up right where you left off on direct examination, talking about how your daughter went missing. Now, you'd agree with me that what you just told the members of the jury is that she was laying down and then she wandered off, right?
I don't know. One minute she was there, and the next minute she wasn't.
Mr. Ryder, though, you'd agree with me that that's not what you told Ms. Rodriguez, right? Or Mr. Rodriguez, right?
No, I didn't tell Armani what was happening because I didn't want him to freak out.
What you told Mr. Rodriguez was that she went to take some pictures, right?
I figured that was a plausible explanation. I just didn't want him there. I was scared, and I didn't know what else to do.
And then Mr. Ryder, you actually told the police something entirely different as well, right?
I was so tired when I woke up. I'd probably been only sleeping for maybe 2 hours. I woke up, and I guess I kind of hoped it was all a dream. So I told them I'd been asleep all night, but soon the crushing reality set in.
Well, Mr. Ryder, what you told them, the police, was that Parker wandered off angry at you all, right?
I guess, I don't know.
Well, I want to talk about what happened once you realized that Parker was gone. You said that you were panicked, right?
Of course.
You wanted to do anything to find her, right?
Yes.
Yet the owner of the campground standing right in front of you, and so of course you asked for help, right?
I was scared, and I'd never been in this position before. I didn't know what to do. This is some guy I'd never met before, and my kid is missing. I don't know who I can trust at this time.
So that's a no. You didn't ask the owner of the campground for help.
No, I didn't.
Well, this campground is pretty large, right? You'd agree with that, right?
Yeah.
And you were searching all over, right?
I was searching in places I thought she might have been.
You started searching at 6:30, right?
Around that time, probably.
So at about 10:30, you'd been searching for 4 hours, right?
I guess that's the math of it, yeah.
And you still had no idea where your daughter was, right?
Well, I was really only looking in places where I thought she'd be.
So, Mr. Ryder, at that point, what you did was you called the police to file a missing persons report, right?
I don't trust them, so no, I didn't call.
So what you're telling us is you didn't ask the owner of the campground for help, right?
No,
And you didn't call the police to ask them for help, right?
no, I didn't.
So then at about 2:30, 4 hours later, you had been searching for your daughter for 8 hours, right?
Yes,
And you still had no idea where she was, right?
no clue.
So you drove 10 miles down the road to a cafe, right?
I did.
And the owner of the cafe, they were standing there, right?
Yes,
And you could ask them for help, right?
I could have, but I didn't. I didn't know who this person was. Again, I come in expecting her to be there at our meetup point that I said we should be at, and then she's not there.
At no point, sir, did you ever ask anyone for help in finding your daughter.
No, I didn't.
And when people asked you where your daughter was, you didn't let them know she was missing.
No, I thought I could find her on my own.
Now, you'd agree with me that when you were at the cafe, it was about 3 a.m., right?
Yes,
Now, you heard mentioned earlier today about an insurance policy that was submitted at that same time, right?
somebody mentioned it, yes.
You'd recognize that if I showed it to you today.
Sure.
Permission to approach and retrieve what's already been entered in as exhibit, I believe it's 27 or 26, 25. Permission to approach a witness with the same. Sir, this is that insurance policy that was submitted at 3 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Now, your name is at the bottom of this, right? Your signature is on it.
Yes.
Now, you agree with me that what this insurance policy means is it gives you $200,000 if Parker dies, right?
I think that's how life insurance works. I'm not sure.
But Mr. Ryder, you filled this out yourself, didn't you?
I did.
And then your signature is on the submission, right?
Yes.
And that's after your daughter's already missing, right?
The start time is at 10:42. That's when we were at the cafe the first time. Like I said, we were making plans, and we made a plan just in case anything had happened. I figured I would also update her life insurance policy in case anything happened. I was left in a ruin after my wife died, and I didn't want the same thing to happen. I wanted to make sure that I was able to get through the loss of yet another one of my family members.
So, sir, you were too panicked to ask for help, but you could think about cashing in on an insurance policy, right?
I pressed the button at 10:42, but I guess I did it wrong, and it just updated at 3:12 when I came back to the cafe.
Just to be clear, that insurance policy is submitted after your daughter was missing, right?
That's when the computer logged it in, yeah.
Permission to approach the witness and retrieve the exhibit
You may.
and republish it to the bench. Now, Mr. Ryder, I want to talk about something that you said that was interesting on direct examination. Now, you said that you and your daughter had a plan, and that if she got separated from you, you all were to meet up at the cafe, right?
Yes.
Now, you heard on direct examination while Detective Chesney was testifying that that cafe is 10 miles down the road, right?
Yes, I didn't realize how far it was when I said it.
And you also heard that Parker Page's phone was found there underneath the dumpster, right?
I don't know how it got there, but
Well,
yeah.
you'd recognize a text message that Parker Page sent that day if I showed it to you today, right?
No, I don't look at Parker's phone.
Is it your testimony that you wouldn't recognize a text message sent by Parker Page today?
I mean, I would recognize a text message, but I don't look through her phone.
Sir, you were shown several exhibits when you prepared for today's trial, and one of those was a text message sent by Parker, right?
Yes.
So you'd recognize that exhibit.
I would recognize those specific texts.
I'm now approaching opposing counsel with what's been marked as Exhibit 27. Permission to approach the witness with the same.
You may.
Would Your Honor like a courtesy copy, please? Now, Mr. Ryder, that's the text that was sent by your daughter on June 14th, right?
I don't see a date on here.
Well, sir, you reviewed this exhibit when preparing for today's trial, right?
Yes, but I don't see a date on this specific.
I'm sorry about that, sir, but you would agree with me it's a fair and accurate copy of this exhibit that you reviewed.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 27 into evidence.
Any objection to 27?
Objection to hearsay, but specifically to Kennedy's statements, not Parker Page's, as those are allowed by the orders on motions in limine.
Counsel?
Your Honor, we're fine with redacting the statements of Kennedy as we're only referring to the statements of Parker Page.
Then that objection is sustained and we will receive Exhibit 27 in a redacted format.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, you agree with me that in order for Parker to send these text messages, she would have had to have her phone, right?
Yes.
And that was at 4:38, right?
Yeah, that's the timeline here.
But what you're telling the members of the jury is that at some point Parker Page got lost, right?
I don't know.
And she walked to the cafe 10 miles down the road and lost her phone,
I don't know.
and then walked 10 miles all the way back up to the overlook and then collapsed, right?
I don't know.
Sir, what you said on direct examination was you all struggled to make it just a couple minutes up into the Lacrone Loop, right?
I did say that.
Because your daughter has osteogenesis imperfecta, right?
I think that's why she got so tired.
She was struggling to walk, right?
Yes.
And she was exhausted after a couple of minutes, right?
Yes.
But you'd agree with me, Mr. Dews, he said he saw you on that trail earlier that day, right?
Yeah, he saw me at the same point that I marked.
Well, Mr. Dews said he saw you at the overlook, right?
That's not true.
Is it your testimony today that when Mr. Dews was testifying that he didn't say he saw you approaching the overlook?
Yes, it is.
So you're saying that Mr. Dews is lying when he said he didn't see you approaching the overlook?
No, I'm saying he didn't say that today. I watched him circle that same point on the trail.
Well, sir, that was when he said he first saw you that day. But there were several times where Mr. Dews said he saw you, right?
That was unclear to me.
Well, Mr. Ryder, what you're saying is that Mr. Dews never saw you at that overlook, right?
I don't know if he thinks he saw me there, but I've never been there.
You're saying if Mr. Dews says that you were at that overlook, he's lying, right?
I don't think he's lying. I think he's just saying what he saw.
Mr. Commissioner approached the witness to retrieve Exhibit 27.
Okay.
Now, I want to talk about what happened while you were actually on that trail. Now, you'd agree with me that you and Parker, you all were fighting, weren't you?
We had an argument, yes.
I mean, you had spent a lot of time away from Parker, right?
I had.
And you didn't mention it on direct examination, but it was about 5 to 6 years, right?
I'd say that's a period of time.
This was your attempt to reconnect with Parker because you didn't have a close relationship, right?
We had a close relationship before I had to go away, but then when I came back, I wanted to reconnect. That's correct.
Exactly. Parker started saying some hurtful things to you, right?
She did.
She said, I hate you.
Yeah.
She said, I wish you'd never gotten out of prison.
Objection, hearsay. May I be heard?
Well, I think I understand the objection, counsel response.
Yes, Your Honor, 2 things. First, these statements have already come out earlier in today's trial through the witness, Mr. Dews, who said he heard these statements. And secondly, we're not using this for the truth of the matter that Parker actually hated Mr. Ryder, but the subsequent action of Mr. Ryder after hearing these statements from Parker.
Did I not rule on this prior to the,
I believe so, yes.
wasn't this litigated?
I had thought that maybe the angry statement was let in, but not the prison statement.
There
I'm,
might be some other grounds to keep the prison statement out, but I think that this has already all come onto the record, so the objection is overruled.
yes, Your Honor. Mr. Ryder, you'd agree with me that that made you angry, didn't it?
It upset me.
And then after that, you snatched Parker's hiking staff out of her hands, right?
I don't agree with some of the things that I did in that moment, and I regret the way that I treated her in that moment, but I sat us down and I calmed us down. I made sure to talk it out. I tried to do the best I could, but yes, I've made mistakes in the past.
Sir, that hiking staff, it made you even angry, right?
It upset me. I was proud. I wanted her to be strong, and I just assumed that she was just leaning on it as sort of like a emotional thing.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel.
Would you like me to, oh, well, it's your demonstrative, you can deconstruct it.
Anything further for this witness?
No redirect. May the witness step down.
You're excused, sir. Thank you. Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. We rest our case and ask for a brief 5-minute recess before closings.
Do we have, I mean, are you amenable to that?
We are amenable to that. I would just inquire as to what time all loss is. If
We
we're-
started at 2, so I think they want us done by 5, so let's take 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
These ballots are a mess, and I made them even worse because I had them stacked. I had this one stacked on this one. It's just terrible. I feel awful about it.
You're that judge.
Yeah, well, you know, they were, yeah, it's all terrible. I think these got reused a couple of times, and so it's very messy in the first place. See. Take a seat, folks. Are we ready for closings?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed, though, may I approach and retrieve evidence? Thank you. May I proceed? Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Mr. Ryder, he was pushed too far, and so he pushed back. If you remember at the beginning of this trial, my co-counsel, Ms. Hall, she came before you and she asked you to remember that phrase because it painted an accurate picture of just what exactly took place on the LaCrone Loop before, during, and after Mr. Ryder and his daughter took their hike. See, we as the state, we told you exactly what did happen. You see, Mr. Ryder and his daughter, they went on the most dangerous trail in the entire campground. And once they got there, and Mr. Ryder took his daughter with brittle bone disease to an area where she could easily be pushed off. They got into an argument that was witnessed by Mr. Kelly Dukes. An argument in which Parker said, "I hate you. I wish you'd never gotten out of prison." And what Mr. Ryder told you today is that made him angry. And he snatched Parker Page's hiking staff out of her hands, and he pushed her off that cliff. But members of the jury, if we're going to say and assert that Mr. Ryder killed his own daughter, we had to have some facts and some proof for that. We're just not here to toss out accusations. See, we walked in here with the burden of proof. We had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Ryder knowingly caused the death of his daughter. In fact, knowingly means that he was practically certain that pushing his daughter off that cliff was going to lead to her dying. And causation, that means that his actions needed to be the direct and foreseeable cause of Parker Page dying. And that's exactly what we proved to you today. But I want to focus on the words beyond a reasonable doubt for a second. That doesn't mean that anything that the defense tosses out hoping it'll stick. It means doubts that are simply put reasonable. And so I want to break down all of the evidence that you've heard today with 3 simple questions that needed to be answered and were. First, how did Parker Page die? Second, when did Parker Page die? And why did Mr. Ryder, why did he kill his own daughter? I want to talk about that first question. How did Parker Page die? Now, you heard from 2 experts in the field today, Dr. Lopez and Dr. Quincy. Now, Dr. Quincy said that it was blunt force trauma, and Dr. Lopez agreed. What Dr. Quincy did do was analyze not only the body of Parker Page, but a couple of materials that were found in Mr. Ryder's tent. And what she found was that the bottom of the hiking staff matched the bruise on Parker Page's body 100%. As a result, she said that it was most likely that bruise that led to Parker Page falling off that cliff. And what did the expert that was being paid by the defense say himself? He said most likely that's the case as well. But there could be some extreme possibilities that we have to consider. Although this was the same person that was fired from his last job for lying and malpractice. Members of the jury, that's not reasonable. To take the claims of an expert that didn't examine the body, didn't take a look at the campsite, and deem those credible. I told you exactly how she died. And Mr. Dews actually painted a picture for you. He claimed that he saw Mr. Ryder and Parker Page at the very edge of the cliff where he took the police officers the very next day. And what you heard from the defense all throughout today's trial was that Mr. Dews, he was mistaken. And somehow, when he took the police to the exact same spot that he claims he saw them, he just got lucky when they found Parker Page's body. Even though Midland's campground, Calkins Campground, expands miles in a very gigantic area, Mr. Dews somehow just picked a random location and a random spot that he didn't see Mr. Ryder in, and they found Parker Page's body there. That's not reasonable. We know that Mr. Ryder, he has a tendency to lie. What he did on that stand was he told you one story, and then he said he told Mr. Rodriguez an entirely different one. And then he said the next day he told the police an entirely different one. So I want to talk about that second question. When did Parker Page die? Now, you received the text message sent by Parker Page at 4:30. It's the last known message that we have from Parker. And what it says was that Jordan is so angry right now because Parker said she loved Corbin more. Said some hurtful things to Mr. Ryder. And that was sent 2 minutes before we all heard a scream. Now, Mr. Rodriguez would like you to believe that there was a scream that took place in an entirely different location. But once again, the defense chose to call someone that has every reason to lie. Mr. Rodriguez was the one that recommended that they go out on that trail. And what he said was he heard the scream the second time, and he did absolutely nothing. See, if people start thinking that Calkins Campground isn't safe, if people start thinking that Calkins Campground has an owner that just neglects the safety of its residents, well, then Mr. Rodriguez, he doesn't make as much money. Mr. Rodriguez needs people to believe that this is a safe campground, and he told them that himself, even though he knew himself just how dangerous the Lacrone Loop was. He didn't say a word to Mr. Ryder. That's the kind of witness that the defense chose to call. So finally, you need to be asking yourselves, why is Mr. Ryder being accused? Why did he harm his own daughter? And you heard on the cross-examination of Mr. Ryder that his daughter and him were separated for 5 years. They were rekindling their relationship, but they didn't really have a close one. And what you saw was that Mr. Ryder, he submitted a life insurance policy that would give him $200,000 if Parker died. And in that moment, where he was angry with Parker, it was the perfect time to push her off that cliff and make his way back down that trail and cash in on that life insurance policy. And after he knew that Parker was missing, we don't have a record of any phone calls made by Mr. Ryder. We don't have any witnesses saying that Mr. Ryder asked them for help. We just have this life insurance policy that's submitted with Mr. Ryder's signature on it. That gives him $200,000 now that Parker's dead. Members of the jury, the facts are clear. Mr. Ryder was pushed too far, so he pushed back. Find him guilty of aggravated murder. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Closing argument for the defense.
May it please the court. Your Honor, members of the jury, Jordan Ryder wasn't there. There is no testimony or evidence in today's trial that places my client anywhere near the scene of this crime. And now, Counselor Graham just came up before you and told you that my client pushed back against his daughter. But members of the jury, I'm going to ask you for the next few minutes to push back with me against the state's case. Because my client